Ron.
Okay. I'm going to call to order the strategic planning meeting for Tuesday, July 21st. Let the record show that all aldermen are present on the committee with the exception of Alderman Polito, who has resigned. I guess that's a formal.
I sent you guys emails today.
Yeah.
He resigned effective immediately.
I don't know if you can be excused if you resign. So. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the previous committee meeting. Can I get a second, please?
So second.
Seconded by Alderman Gonzalez. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. No unfinished business. Got some new referrals up here for consideration. Starting off, this is something we visited in the past, live streaming our city council meetings and committee meetings as well as our regular meetings, bringing forward a discussion on this to the council. I've reached out to the mayor's office and our IT group here, who's provided some good information. So let's try to make this as short and sweet as possible. Obviously, this is a long time coming. This has been something that we visited as a council. I want to say back when I first started on the council, like 4 years ago, and it was around cost of about $10,000. Well, fortunately, the tech has gotten so much cheaper, the new technology's out there, and we are seeing more and more requests, I don't want to say pressure from the community, from residents, but requests from residents who want to tune into city council meetings, as far as open government and transparency goes. In fact, and it came at an interesting time, I think the entire council received a email the other day from the New York Coalition for Open Government Incorporated, which gave us a grade of D in regards to transparency. They went out and they rated, I think, cities that have greater than 10,000 people across New York State. And really the main takeaway from that email was the fact that we do not live stream. We do broadcast on the closed loop television or the cable television, our meetings. We don't broadcast our committees, but we don't have the videos posted on our website or Facebook page. Certainly, Alderman Doherty's done a good job trying to get the meetings posted up on the internet somewhere, but let's face it, I think residents generally want to watch things in real time. And it makes it a heck of a lot easier if it syncs with our city website. So there's just, I gave you some stuff as far as who this organization is. Government exists to serve its citizens. Access to the information needs to be simple, and we all need to be held accountable. And I think all of us are all for open and transparent government.
And then they had a link to the equipment we can buy.
Oh, did they really? I didn't see that.
No, it just seems.
Oh, no, I don't think it did. I didn't see hey, we'll sell you. We'll fix your
that's
problem.
just how that I read.
Yeah, there's a magic link on there. They get a commission.
Because we don't have the videos online. I know we're behind the times and you should have that.
Yeah.
Everything is out there.
Okay, so I reached out to Mayor Eddie Sundquist in Jamestown, and I said, what are you guys doing? And he said that they started using Boxcaster in January, and it is a user-friendly, simple, just awesome program that they are very, very happy with. And you're able to take your video source, connect it to Boxcaster, and it just shoots it out into the World Wide Web there, into Facebook land and YouTube and your city website and all over the place, wherever you want to have your streaming destinations. And he sent me, I actually sat in on one of Jamestown's sessions, and it was even a Zoom session, so they can even connect to Zoom, and it broadcasted out to their, again, I'm not a tech person, but it was pretty cool. He says, they have just as good of service when they are in physical, the room together, but this was a Zoom session that they're still running, and it was seamless. The transmission was seamless. And I thought, man, this is pretty cool stuff that I would take it back to you guys. And what's interesting is when I reached out to our IT group here, this is the same company that Jason said he came up with maybe a year or 6 months ago or something like that. So it seems to have a pretty reputable background. So I called and got a hold of the representative, the Boxcast representative, Mark Trill, and for the same level of service, and I'll go over some of those services that Jamestown is currently using, they have the growth plan, which is about $1,600 per year. Again, it's that type of simple device, and it syncs up, and it really is easy for them to use. As I was kind of thinking this through, I know we have George who manages our the cable television broadcast. I thought, well, who would be able to use and stream this? And I just, for the heck of it, reached out to Boundless Connections just down the street. And they said this is a great opportunity for some of their students. They primarily work with young high school students and even younger who are looking to get IT training. They would be for about $1,500 a year. They would send some of their student interns down to set up broadcast, record, and put the equipment away for 52 weeks. So this is possibly an opportunity to give some of the youth in our community some great experience, civic engagement, so on and so forth. So, as far as, I don't want to run through all of these features because I'm not totally tech savvy, so I don't necessarily know what Chromecast is, but I know that we probably, and I talked to Jason again, and he said he actually created a City of Olean YouTube page. I know, Bill, you guys got now a good Facebook page that's up and running. Certainly we've got a city website, but essentially once you flip the system on, it pings, like maybe some of us have seen the governor or the president when they're doing their meetings. You're on Facebook, all of a sudden, boom, these guys are live broadcasting. This allows for unlimited streaming and viewing, and it does allow for cloud storage of our meetings. It allows for all sorts of different video management, as well as viewer engagement, so you can actually see who watched, for how long, is it doing its job? Are we reaching more of our residents, keeping them informed? Are they coming in on real time? And also, I believe most of the programs allow for even comments to be made. Maybe we want that, maybe we don't. But I'm sure, it's, I say that as a joke, all right? We always want comments. But, so it seems like it's a pretty intuitive system. And again, Kevin, you were asking me a bunch of questions. It allows for audio downloading, and if you want to ask more questions, I'd be more than happy to get the rep. Another thing that they can do, and I think Jamestown is doing, is you can actually do graphic overlays where we could have our meeting and then have the City of Olean emblem or some sort of heading, something on the video itself.
So this is all basically software, though, right?
Yeah.
So we'd have to buy a camera or an iPad. Oh, you didn't? Okay, sorry. Because I pulled up the old quote from the local vendor we got 3 years ago. We can talk about that too, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on that.
Weren't they were the only vendor too, right? If I remember correctly, we only had asked them. We hadn't actually.
Yeah, our IT department was brought in on the. We basically threw the notion of let's get the live streaming looked at, and our IT department reached out to the community for a local option. They came back with the
10,000. But we didn't send it out to bid for any other maybe somebody within the county or okay, gotcha.
So so the way that it really kind of, again, thanks to the mayor and the IT group, some of this is kind of a combination of their prices along with the best information that I had at the time. I was going to show you guys some videos of how Boxcast was. I was going to show you a couple videos of Jamestown's sessions, but we don't have any internet in here. And that's always been kind of one of the hang-ups and one of the problems. So, kind of said to Bill and the IT group, how do you problem solve that? What needs to be fixed? So it seems like, Bill, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, what we have to do is put an access point in here, and that can be done by our electric division, and that'll be about, I think it's $12,240.
$1,200.
$1,200, I'm sorry, yeah. Internet access point in here. So then we'll have it. It'll be here, and we'll be able to live cast, I guess you say.
Yeah.
And if we need it for other things too, you guys have to look up things while you're here and that, you'll have that availability to you also. So,
I'm surprised we don't have that already. I mean, wouldn't the courts want that?
the court has it. The court has a secure system. They have their own in here.
Oh.
They don't want, yeah. They don't want you waiting for a traffic ticket, texting on your phone and watching Facebook and stuff if,
And they don't.
But people do it anyways,
They don't want us on their system either.
Oh, okay.
So, thank you, Bill. So this is kind of I guess about a $1,400 investment to get the internet Wi-Fi capability in here. It would certainly help. I know a number of residents who have reached out to me and said before, when they try to come in here and they try to even use their phones to live stream our sessions, the service is spotty and things like that. I don't know whether or not the mayor would have to decide whether or not there would be visitor access or anything like that.
We have that now in other places in this building here.
Okay.
So that would remain also.
And this also would, I'm assuming this is going to be the permanent configuration for all meetings going forward. I don't think we're going back to the police training room anytime in the next year, just because I know that there's spotty 4G service down there, as well as the Wi-Fi is, kind of hit or miss. When I tried to live stream the meetings, they just kind of went to dog shit. So.
Well, and honestly, my whole thought with why the police training room was always attractive to me was because we kind of sat like this, right?
Right.
We weren't in a straight line, and it was constructive where we could all kind of just talk, and I think we're accomplishing that the way we are.
Sure.
This social distancing, the seating area. So.
John, way back when we first started going on TV, it used to be the students from BOCES, the people that did TV, and they would come and tape the shows and do all that. They didn't charge anything because they would get class credits. Is there anything at Bonaventure or JCC that they do that type of class where they could get credits instead of costing them $1,500 a year?
So.
Not that that's a lot.
Right. I mean that's yeah. So. It's a valid point, Linda, but here's the catch. They don't go year-round, right? So when they're in session, yeah, maybe they can come and show up and help us out. Most of them have those types of programs on campus. I know they have their own closed-circuit television programs. But then what do? Then you're paying George, or I don't know, you're paying an employee to come in, Jason, and do overtime. It's Olean High School it's I don't want to say investing in our youth, but it's something we could explore.
Is it going to be year-round in the school?
Yeah.
Year-round.
But our residents live here year-round.
Well, so the people that live in Bonaventure and JCC, a lot of those were residents that live here
I think
that wanted to do it.
Boundless Connection programs are here
Yeah.
right now, so.
I'm just curious.
Those are nuances that I would just pass off to Bill, obviously, and as far as any contracts or who he wants to staff it.
Yeah. Just a thought.
Sure. So as far as the hardware goes, it really all it requires is an iPad with a stand. That's the system that Jamestown's using right now, and then just because there are some issues or have been some issues with hearing, people not hearing as well from here. Jason and I talked about maybe having one of these boom mics or whatever that you can connect right to your iPad, and they do a pretty good job really amplifying the sound. So that's really the one-time startup cost. It's about $2,200, and then I broke out your reoccurring costs. Whether there's maybe a lower plan, the $1,200 plan Jason had, Bill had mentioned, or a similar, the growth plan is about $1,600 a year, a licensing fee, and then whether or not we were to use the Boundless Connections to provide student workers, that's around $3,000 a year. So the one time is really about $5,400, and reoccurring costs of around $3,000, $31.
Probably, and not that this is a big deal, but we probably have to replace hardware every couple of years.
Right.
I think for $3,000, that's a pretty big bang for the buck, right? It's going to benefit a lot more people than $3,000 normally gets you.
Right. Right, and I think it, no, you're right. You're
And
right.
I think being transparent and putting out to the public is important, and it's more than that.
So what I'm going to ask as we move forward is I'll bring forward, and Bill, if you want to fine tune the number, but I was going to propose transferring $5,500 from our general fund contingency into IT's budget, in order to make sure the funding's there and try to get this up and running ASAP.
I got if I may, John.
Sure.
How about going not to exceed 6,000, just because we may have some other additional cost here, and we want to come back to you and we can get it going.
I'm just going to ask a dumb question, but the IT probably couldn't find that in our own budget without us doing a transfer.
No, the budgets are pretty tight.
Well, I'm not an Apple guy, so the iPad, the camera on that is sufficient, I guess, and we'd set it up somewhere over here to catch all of us kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah, and as, say you have a stand there, and as you have the student worker, I mean, obviously.
They're going to be an
similar to the way
operator.
George does, yeah.
They're going to be an operator, okay.
So the plan is not to tie it into the existing camera that he uses?
No.
How will this play in with your, with the deaf interpreters?
That was actually going to be my next question.
So
I will hear you.
the hearing impaired,
Is that a joke, Bill?
No.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Sorry. Well, we're going to have the interpreters here. I don't know how we can probably position them. We'd have to work on how we're going to position them. Right now, we have two cameras. I'm not sure.
Do you mean,
I mean, it
I
looked
wanna
like
say
your
a lot of-
presentation there showed you could use whatever device you wanted to hook up.
it's an interesting point.
because you had that little box could attach, you could have a separate camera. I'm assuming if they're adding the emblem and they call it the lower third, where you're kind of like City of Olean, or you know what I mean. If it was just Paul giving, you could change the lower third. I mean, that's what.
So a lot of those, even when you do your own Facebook videos now, you can click on it to automatically add
Closed captioning.
closed captioning.
I know YouTube offers that as a free service once they render the video. Sometimes it doesn't come with the live streams, but it's
That costs money. You can get it, you just gotta pay for it.
yeah, and I'm sure some of the bigger dogs out there doing this that are making lots of money doing YouTube videos probably already just have it as part of their plan. Like YouTube bends over backwards for those guys, being small fish. But the other thought was, I mean, we've always been talking about the fact that like we kind of just did the interpreters as like a polite thing. There was no actual requirement, and some people said, well, you could be sued if you didn't, and it was all this like an ADA compliance that happened with the FCC or something. It made it sound like it was like to avoid litigation that 1 in 2 million people might try to sue you for not having interpreters. I mean, that.
Along those lines, if we look at the cost of our 2 interpreters for the year, would that offset the cost of having that on bond? Maybe it's not as expensive now since it's been out there for a long time.
Getting closed captioning,
Yeah.
and then because you'd have to hire those if it's a requirement for or we're calling it a requirement for cable television. You'd assume we'd have to have it for every live stream we did, regardless if it was going to Facebook or to cable. Which means this meeting would have to be interpreted. It just.
I mean, just from what I've seen, it looks like the automated caption abilities of most places these days are pretty good. So I would think that's probably an option, just have it part of your program.
What's the cost? Versus 2 people versus
So, yeah, maybe it's not, maybe the uploaded saved video that is on YouTube and Facebook and all these other places after it's been live streamed already gets closed captioning for free. If that's how it works, maybe that's when the closed captioning comes in and we can the signers altogether.
I mean, I'm not, and I believe we get the cable provides it. We get that service for free, don't we, Bill?
Yes.
But we've got to pay someone to run it. You know, I mean, I wish we could get some sort of data to show who even, you know, how many residents even watch.
I know, at least with this live streaming, you're gonna get that data.
Right, exactly.
And with we don't know. We've been trying to get that information, and we don't know how many people are actually watching it. During the time that we did not have it on, we didn't get any complaints on it.
I would be inclined to
We could do a survey.
think that.
Sorry.
I'm smiling on the mic.
Yeah. No, I would be inclined to think that the goal should be that this package, this Boxcast should replace that we shouldn't be doing both.
No. And I mean, something, I don't know how big of a thing it is, because I don't even subscribe to cable.
Right.
But a lot of people do this thing called streaming spectrum or whatever. So it comes over the internet. It's somehow it's played a little different than normal, and from what I can tell, we are not in that program.
Like
so
the Slingbox thing?
yeah, and so like the channel's there, and you go to it and it says public broadcast, blah blah blah, but it's just blank or has some other show on during our time.
Yeah.
So,
And we might still need George to come in and operate it, right? Like
if that's what the mayor, that's what the council were to decide, to use George to broadcast.
Keep in mind that George he comes in later in the day when there's council meetings, so it's not an overtime show
Right,
for him.
right.
So he would just come in
that's
earlier.
Normal, he'll come in like at noon and work till 8.
Okay.
So we have him here.
But I bet if we asked him, he'd rather just work
9 to 5.
5 every day.
Yeah.
Well, we're still going to need him in the building because we have to open up for council meetings and then he has to clean up afterwards and that. But that's not an additional cost because it's that's the way he schedules.
Okay. I don't want to throw you under the bus, Bill, but would it be, I mean, as the Times Herald is here, does it make sense that, like, how do we get some feedback from the community? Like, if they are, you know, love the TV, then they should call your office and tell you.
I mean,
If they love the television channel, tell them to call Bill's office.
I know 2 people, possibly 3, that may watch it on TV, and one of them is they go south for several months.
And would they have the ability? Do they have internet? Could they just watch it on live stream?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
instead of on their computer, instead of on their TV screen.
That's true. And
It took him
remember,
40 years to
we
learn how to
have
change the VCR, okay?
a higher channel, a lot of people don't have that.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't even
I
know.
don't even
cable.
know where it's at.
I don't even have cable.
Half the time it looks like, the picture quality is terrible, the sound quality is terrible. I mean, like, it's a losing endeavor.
Right.
And
It's just.
I would be reluctant to try to, like, well, Bill got 4 phone calls, so we should
Right,
do this.
right. Okay.
I don't know, whatever. I don't, at the end of the day, it doesn't cost us anything, so who cares? But
Right.
that's the thing that we need to be heading towards.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? So I'll move forward on that and work with Bill. Okay.
I did talk to Jason, and we could, once this is approved, we could probably get this rolling within a matter of a few weeks.
Okay.
So the quote we got on November 6, 2017 was 3 cameras, cabling, controller, computer, connectors, installation, that was $4,000. Tech services, software testing, streaming services, archiving, that was $4,000. And then tech support for 6 months, and that was $2,000.
Technology is a cool thing.
Yeah.
No, because during the time of that quote too, I had a phone that I couldn't do 4K. So this phone could do
Right.
4K panoramic. You could set this phone up if you wanted to attach it to the eye. I mean, if you just set it back far enough, you wouldn't have to have anybody panning either. That could be.
I mean, Bradford does it, right? Have you ever seen the Bradford City Council meetings? It's
No, I try to avoid Bradford.
Well, I get that, but at the same time, I mean, it's nothing special. literally like Jim McDonald turns his phone on and broadcasts it to the biggest station. Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So, moving along then. This is meant to kick off a discussion that I think strategic planning needs to play a greater part in, and I think we need to at least address this on a monthly basis. So, what I'm bringing this up is really an infrastructure plan, and I know a lot of this goes on behind the scenes, but I don't necessarily think that we are in sync as a council with what's going on in terms of the planning of our capital and infrastructure projects. We get updates every now and again, but really at the end of the day, we are the entity that passes the financing of these projects. And so I'm hoping that maybe if we start creating a process to do not every single committee night, but maybe at least on a monthly basis, and it could just be a 5-minute conversation in terms of capital project reviews. Whether or not we pay for the bills and we pay for the lawsuits. So we currently have millions of dollars of capital projects underway, or at least in the planning stages. So I'm really asking and reaching out to the mayor and the DPW to be included in the strategic planning process, and especially when it comes to risks and opportunities. And I had this on the agenda before. Of course, we all got some phone calls and took another beating on social media, and I appreciate the information. I mean, Bob was very proactive. I had a question. I called his office. I said, "What the heck now? We got more sewage dumping into the river. I thought we fixed this." And going back again to when I first started the council, I just grabbed a couple headlines. I mean, we have an ancient infrastructure, okay? And every time we close, it feels like we plug one hole, another one opens. No pun intended, but just as far as the sewage discharging into the river. And I know many communities do that, but at the same time, I would hope that this community, our council, wants to lead in best practice and close these holes. And how do we address them? How can we fix these issues once and for all? And this all ties back to infrastructure. So really, we're doing Washington Street this year as far as a water line infrastructure project goes. We've kind of had the ongoing sewer lining projects along the dikes. But where are we going? What's our next major project? Where are we going down the road? And so I reached out to Bob in the mayor's office and said, can you provide us some of your master plan, some of your information, not only to inform us, but to inform the public. And so Bob sent out, and some of this, if you saw his email from earlier today, this might be a little repetitive, but I'm hoping that maybe at some point I'm going to turn it over to Bob and or Bill to speak on some of these major projects that we've got going on now and that we're looking towards. So some of the general terminology, concept or feasibility phases, planning, design, construction. You guys I'm not going to read you the definitions, but really between water, sewer, general, DPW can manage 3 to 4 major construction projects per season. Projects take about 24 months to complete, and DPW can really manage 6 to 8 major projects at any one time, going between the design to the construction phase. And let me see if I can enlarge that a little bit. It's kind of challenging to read. So here we have our general fund master plan. So I guess at this point, I'm gonna just ask either Bill or Bob to maybe walk us through this a little bit and help us understand, so we've got, and again, what's my perspective? We know the projects, we know Walkable Phase 2, we know it's under construction, we know we've got the funding secured, but I think it's helpful for us to see, all right, here's our grant funding, here's our city funding, and if we have city funding, are we aware that we have committed, the council has committed to the city funding? Or is this something that we need to start planning for and thinking about, and how are we going to finance it, right? Are we going to bond? Are we going to pay out of a general fund balance? What is our plan moving forward? So I don't know, Bob or Mayor.
I didn't come that well prepared, John, reached out to me, but I think the big point that I wanted to convey is that there is, a great deal of planning going on. When you bring up infrastructure, a lot of that falls on DPW. Just, DPW really is maintained within the right of way, so it's streets and utilities. Of course, there are other divisions that are working outside the right of way on capital improvement projects. I didn't list those. I just wanted you to show some of the things that I prepared in the general water and sewer fund, that there is planning going on. There's a lot of thought behind financing. We have 4 capital projects in construction this year, and we've heard about a lot of those between water and sewer in general. We actually have 8 projects in design or construction currently, so we're running around like a chicken with our heads cut off this summer. I mean, the delay from COVID was a big part of that, but we realized even with grant funding and consultants and inspection costs from outside agencies that we really can't manage more than 4 construction projects in a season. That's really capacity, and that doesn't include the sewer lining project. It doesn't include chips. That's 5 and 6. We've got the Times Square entrance project. That's not really, we're not really considering that a major construction project. So we've got a number of other projects going on at any one time besides capital, but they really take the most amount of effort, especially when we're dealing with granting agencies. So as we get these 4 projects completed, which probably won't be until spring, at least a couple of them, I think we can look at our list of projects that we have in the planning phase and perhaps move those into, like, say, design phase. And all of this is going to kind of happen naturally, but you're right, we need to look at it, at the list of projects, and we've got a lot of projects in survey. I mean, I have Front Street project that's up there being surveyed, and we know sometime down the line that we're going to have to address Front Street. So there's work being done behind the scenes. A lot of these projects, whether they're in construction or in design, there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes. And, I try to keep we're all the loop as best we can, and we work on it. But I think it's important for you all to be aware of them.
So,
Bob, you mind if I touch on? I mean, maybe if you guys want to ask questions, but you mind if I touch on the overflow? That's one point.
Yeah, sure.
Brad Cancer, he's going to address like the specific details of what happened. But I shared with you a presentation that I gave to concerned citizens maybe a year last winter, I think.
Hey, Bob, I don't mean to cut you off. I actually was going to pull that up.
Oh, okay.
And I know it's lengthy. You don't have to go through the whole thing, but if it would help, do you want to address that now, or do you want to wait?
Well, we can wait, I guess. I mean, as far as planning, I think, again, it's important maybe to work together on that and keep you abreast of these projects.
Paul, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask Bob specifically about the projects that are on that list that are associated with DRI funding. So that would be walkable only in phase 3, right?
Yes.
That would be the Oak Hill Park project. That would be the streetscape, right? That's basically sidewalks and beautification.
South Union.
Part of the South Union Street.
Right?
Yeah, that was the thing that jumps out to me right there was the, and maybe I just need my memory refreshed, but,
I think we have it till Henley.
right, and the 1.6 million gets us to further than we want. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think in addition, that's the one project that, I hope that we can find some funding for.
Yeah.
We'll continue to, make an effort to find grant funding for that. I hope that, a state grant came out this year called TAP, it's Transportation Alternatives Economic Fund, phase 2 and phase 3. It was supposed to come out, but kind of COVID delayed that, but, a $3 million project, if you remember when Alta came in and they did that design, they did a feasibility study, concept plans. That estimate was $3 million to get past Green Street, and that would be to make, a side path connection, which would eventually be Valley Trail, and median, as we know, like 2 pedestrians were killed in the last 2 years crossing the street. I think it's a good project that kind of ties in those neighborhoods, Green Street, Irving Street, those low-income neighborhoods, but important grocery store, and it helps those people across the street, and it's a gateway to our downtown. It not only brings people into our downtown who have to work there, who may want to spend money there, it's just a gateway for anybody driving to our downtown. Make it a project, but out of all these projects that we have in the next 5 years, I personally think to do it correctly, to have this one-time opportunity to improve the state road, because that's not an easy task. Because it's a long process, it's a long approval process that, I'm hoping, as we go into design, which is in the next several months, we could go into that design perhaps with the idea to expand the project. No decisions would have to be made, but we get the design in place, we get the approval in place, and we see what happens with our financial situation.
I think you bring up a good point, though. I think a lot of times when we consider projects like this, we talk a lot about pedestrian safety. And that is, since I've only lived in that part of the city for 10 years now, and there's been 2 people that have died getting hit by cars crossing in the dark, in the rain, or whatever. And one of them got hit, and the driver didn't even know it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that's a very legitimate need. And I think the other part of it is, I've made it very clear my intentions for the multi-use path that could go around the city and connect to the Valley River Trail. And I think that would be where it had to make the most sense to connect up down there. Whatever.
I think you bring up a valid point and kind of an important aspect of all of these projects that we have going on, and that's to try to tie it back to the ultimate strategic plan to create Olean walkable and family friendly.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to bike and walk anywhere safely.
Yeah.
That's.
And who has that? What cities have that? Like
Germany.
Exactly.
The bikes have their own lane, the people have their own lane, the cars have their own lane.
But John, I think the other thing, and this kind of tails off of what Paul just said, when we're doing phase 2, which is going to start soon, we also have pedestrians getting hit over by the hospital. And I think we have to find a way to tie that in and then go out to Front Street, because it all ties back into walkable Olean, and that was our whole goal to begin with. The other thing I just wanted to add, this is great. I just think we need to, and this is my little pet peeve about 5-year capital plans, is put dates in there to, okay, this is the planning phase, this is the bid phase, but we know the dates that these things are happening, so the council is more in tune, and we all know what's coming up. Because
even if it's just years.
right.
I
But I
don't
think-
mean March 32nd,
But-
March 32nd, right?
But if you put the years in, we know what's coming, and like you had pointed out, we know we have to look down the road for this funding, or Carrie and Bob know certain grants come around, and they know the deadlines. But if we put the years in there, that's your 5-year capital plan, and it shows, it gives the council kind of a trail to follow, so we know what we're doing, because, and that way things aren't popping up that we go, oh yeah, you talked about that, but I don't remember it. And that way it's there in black and white, and nobody can say, no, it wasn't on there.
And
It
then
just makes sense.
when we're thinking about budgeting and bonding, you know, yeah, do we want to pay for this now? I don't know. What do we have in 3 years that we're going to want to do? You can look at that and go there.
Exactly.
Got a question. I don't remember, just not to delve into any of the details, but they've only been near misses at the hospital, right? Because I remember that topic coming up a lot. I don't remember anybody being hit.
Oh, they've been hit, they've been bumped, they
3?
have
Okay.
been
No,
killed. But yeah, they
somebody died?
check with the hospital, they keep track of them, because they see when they're young.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
they
just.
haven't hit.
Okay. No, I mean, every time we talk about, like, should we put over a pedestrian footbridge? What are we doing with that intersection? It's always been, well, they've only been near misses. Let's keep on the drawing board. And that's kind of what I remember, so.
Yeah, I did just like to keep it on the radar because it is a safety hazard. And if we're talking about pedestrian safety, shouldn't that be every place in the city? You know,
Sure.
not just one
Sure.
or two.
I reached out to the hospital board to tell them they should allow a small segment of the property to be smoking so that they don't have all their pedestrians cross the street.
If I could see one phrase summing up really the next 10 years, it should be safety and sustainability. All right, we should look for, you know, the most efficient and cheapest ways to do things that add the most bang for your buck back into the community. And this is a great list. And what I'm suggesting today wasn't meant to dive into each one of these projects by any means. As we move forward, again, I want this talk to be, we can just quickly look at some of these other master plans, but it's to revisit this on a monthly basis and maybe ask Bob to do a presentation on the South Union Street project, so we get that, again, when did we see that presentation that, you know, the people did for us? A year ago? I mean, it seems like a while ago.
Yeah,
we need refreshers. We need to keep all of this, because if we can keep it current, then I think it helps our planning process. And like Paul says, I mean, it helps us know what we have to fund.
Can you back up one slide, please?
Yeah.
The pedestrian safety action plan, $330K funded by, that's DRI money as well, right?
No, that was a federal grant. It was fully funded. That's RFP at Main Street, RFP at the trail crossing at Constitution.
The flashing lights?
Yeah, upgrades at State and Front, State and Roland, and North First and North Union Street.
Did we ever add Main Street at the Y to that list? Before we went on?
No, we wanted to do a traffic study, and then we didn't think we wanted to wait until the school was in session. But
Well, that's not going to happen for a couple of years.
Yeah, because Bill, we went over there, and I don't know if everything kind of went, was it the COVID stuff happened? I don't know, but.
Yeah, well, like Bob said, we talked and said, okay, if we do a traffic study now, the school's not in session, so it's not gonna be an active count. So I guess at the time we were hoping school would get back in session and then be able to do it, so we may have to take a different approach to that.
Okay. So here is a snapshot of the sewer master plan. And again, I think maybe going forward, as we do more of these infrastructure plans discussions, maybe we have some talks about specific projects. You know, so for example, the Olean, South Olean siphon, which is something you guys will talk about, perhaps. Is that part of the sewage stuff or not?
we've been talking about that project for probably at least a year. We've gone after grants twice.
That's the thing that goes across the river, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, as Linda said, to put dates or tentative dates on these, I really think it would be helpful to have a ranking, and maybe we're part of that ranking process, but a ranking of the importance. You know, that South Olean siphon project, I don't know, if that sewage line or whatever it is breaks underneath the river, we're gonna have a big problem. I mean, maybe that's a really important project.
Just so you know, we have a sewer master plan in place, and it was originally written in 2011 or before that perhaps.
Yeah.
And it listed projects for 20 years. We updated it in 2016. We're proposing to update it again in 2021. It should be like a cheap thing we can pay for a budget for 10 or 15,000. It kind of ranks our projects, but it lays them out year by year. And the siphon one is really the one sitting there. There's not a lot of projects on our sewer right now, like on our radar, because we're just waiting to get that project started. And we've been waiting for grant funding for some time. This year, no grant applications have come out, unfortunately. So that's really kind of where we're at. That's on our city website, and we're going to develop, as we get into water, our plan, Brad and I, is to take that, use it as a template, and make a water master plan. We probably have 5-year projections, but we really want beyond that.
So we are still keeping up with the sanitary sewer lining, $250,000 a year. Is that right?
Except for this year.
No, I think we do it every year.
We're doing
I
it.
thought we got a pass this year because of COVID.
We didn't get a pass entirely, we got what,
$90,000.
$90,000. So.
Oh, okay, so.
If the DEC wants their money, they don't give no passes.
Basically, that's all we requested. We felt
Is that in the budget?
we wanted to do something this year. So we did ask for the waiver, and they granted us $90,000.
Okay, cool. All right, so then we have some stormwater projects going on again. And again, as you see, so many of these need funding, and we're fortunate. I mean, Carrie and Bob, they do a great job coming up with grant applications and grant funding. But who's to say, our state is handing out more money this year than ever before to keep people afloat. Maybe these grants are going to dry up in the next couple of years. Maybe one of these projects is of the utmost critical. And I guess I would rather talk about it sooner rather than later. And then here's the last, the water. I guess this is the beginning of the water master plan, or at least current projects. So obviously these are the 3 that we know are under construction. But we've talked about the water treatment plant, the wall that's collapsing there, and a citywide hydraulic study. Bob, can you take a minute and talk about that hydraulic study?
Sure. I mean, as our lines age, and some of our water lines are up to 80, 90, 100 years old. Around the time that water lines were established in ductile iron, so nobody's dealing with water lines that are any older than lines are. Nobody knows what's going to happen. They've obviously got their useful life, so we need to get into a replacement plan, starting with Washington Street, but after that, dealing with areas that are the worst. And you say bang for your buck. We need to do a study of our lines. Basically, you lay out all the lines, and you take our hydrant flows and you input them into this study. And then when you replace a line, you can project where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, right? Whether it's replacing 5 blocks or 10 blocks, and it's data. It's data analytic driven. So that's a $50,000 or $60,000, $70,000 project. We've applied for a grant for it last year. It's something that needs to be funded before we start replacing water lines, so that we know, the best place to start. We can easily rank them by studying this data.
So that's like a computerized system that helps to communicate what the proper lines are.
Sure, it's hard to explain hydraulics and everything behind it. Even if we were to expand our system, it'll project how long you could expand your system before you would need a booster.
know, I know a guy, he hasn't been to the council meetings in a while, he knows all about our city water line needs. We're breaking in on horses.
Now you jinxed it. Now I'm gonna start showing up
It's like
again.
beetlejuice, it's just gonna come out of the middle.
Scott Paleto,
He's
Scott
gonna do a
Paleto,
write-in
Scott
campaign
Paleto.
against me.
What's that?
He's gonna do a write-in campaign against me. The human pardon. All right, so as I said, I was gonna pull this off in case you guys wanted to reference it. And if you want me to.
You do not pay for this service.
Is that what it says?
No.
Okay. Is there any?
I can take you through this as quick as possible. I think we spent 2 hours with concerned citizens.
Oh, yeah.
The mayor and
It's
then
a long time.
there. And they were a tough crowd, but I think after they understood what we're up against when it comes to our sewer system, because DVH, passed the Clean Water Act in 1972. Well, the city had been established for 100 years before that. We go to the second slide. It's a timeline of important events during the city. We established in the early 1800s, and it wasn't until 1937 that we had a sewer. So before that, sewage was just running into the river all by itself, and the city was developed, between the late 1800s and the 1930s, 40s, and 50s was really when our biggest growth was. So that kind of sets the timeline to what we're dealing with even now. We built all this infrastructure, and then we built a plan. Who knows what the design was like back then. And then, at one point we had an explosion in our plan, it was rebuilt, and then, of course, our consent order in 2003, when DEC started getting really serious about, discharging into the river, having overflows and things like that. So, I'm not trying to diminish what happened at all, but we're fighting, this backwards development, right? We're dealing with a long history of infrastructure and aging infrastructure. I think the next couple slides just deal with the master plan, but we are actively, as we in DPW, we're actively trying to eliminate any discharges through redundancy, through improvements. We spent $22 million at our sewage plant. We spent all this money in the generators at our forestry plant. So, it's not something that we're ever complacent about. We're spending the money. We're actively, Brad and I giving directives that we don't want this to happen again. But the I&I slide is important because this is really what happened with this latest discharge. And now that we've got a new plant, we've got a lot of redundancy in place between alarms, generator project, we've got cellular communication in case the radio communication goes down. And I'm going to turn it over to Brad, but now we're dealing with a very long-term, turnaround of dealing with cyanide through sewer lining, through disconnecting drains, basement drains, roof drains, sump pumps. That's going to be a long time for waiting until change of occupancy. So, and that's really what happened. But if you want to take over,
not just the city. There's Allegheny is involved, out in Olean, a very small portion of town of Portville. So everybody that's tied into our system plays a role in compliance, trying to keep stormwater out of the sanitary. Fortunately, we have a separate system, which is ideal. But when it rains like that, there's really no way to keep those two separate.
What is I&I, Brad?
Inflow, which is pumped into our system, and infiltration, which is seepage. So like roof heaters and sump pumps, that's inflow, and infiltration is just like a simple illustration.
Okay.
So what you mean basically is like a building on North Union Street would have a sump pump that pumps out their, water in their basement. And rather than pumping it into the storm drain, they pump it into the sanitary line.
John, I just wanted to follow up because I was talking to Brad about it earlier. A gentleman explained it to me years ago, and he said Olean is like a soup bowl, and you have all these hills like Seneca Heights, Stardust, and the rainwater, everything comes down. Then you add into it, say, the buildings on North Union Street. Very few of them have they were supposed to, but a lot of people haven't disconnected from our system. So you have everything coming in, and a bulk of that water comes from North Union Street. But he explained it that it's coming in and it's all coming down, and it's going so fast into the system that the system can't keep up to it, and that's why we have an overflow. So when we have the rain like we had Thursday, there's no way we can control that. But it's the shape of the city. And he was explaining that we had a meeting one night, and he was explaining that, and it made perfect sense if you look it over that. That's
Right. So what most people don't understand is when you have an overflow like that, we had an overflow of 64,000 gallons roughly into the Allegheny River, which was already unusable basically for recreation, that everybody saw for you can't use it when it's like that. So when we bypass 64,000 gallons, maybe 10% of that is sewage, because it's so dilute from the infiltration. You see it all over. It's just the operation that we have now, where we have to publicly announce these things. It gets very lower.
Sure. And at the same time, it doesn't. It helps, I guess, be able to, understand, but at the same time, we want to get better, right? I mean, and that's our goal.
Brad, do we have a lot of combined sewers still where the sanitary and the storm are the same? We have none. Okay.
We in the city of Olean, or we in the city of Olean?
In the city of Olean.
Oh, in the city, that would be like a lot of houses.
Yeah.
A lot of houses would have I&I. Not every house separates their basement drain or their sump pump or their gutters. There's still houses.
Right, but we don't have any sewers in the street that are combined, is what
Correct.
you answered.
We used to have some on dead ends, some dead end streets that help flush dead end sewers, sanitary sewers.
Mhm.
We've since disconnected all of those.
The other thing that we brought up years ago, and I wish we could touch on it again, is having something like a codes officer in DPW to enforce some of these disconnects. Because you can write in letters, that doesn't mean you're going to disconnect. And all it does is it's adding to the problem in how you enforce it.
So actually, to get on John's point though, like we want to get better. At the same time, from a construction standpoint or an engineering standpoint, I mean, they typically design a single family home with a 4-inch sewer main, because the typical home is only going to have so many residents. So why would you put a 6 or an 8-inch sewer main into that house when it's 3 times overkill, right? Nobody expects 38 people to move into a single family home. At the same regards, like we're doing a 50-year storm, so like that 1%, you upsize all your lines to, I don't know what they're at, 12-inch now, maybe 2 foot in some of those lines that might handle that kind of. I mean, all of a sudden we're going to go 4-foot lines just so we can be better to handle that 1%, that 1972 flood. You know what I mean? The 100-year floods. It's just now all of a sudden you're oversizing, and I get that, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to trivialize throwing sewage into the river, but at the same time, you can't plan for it. You don't do the frost line based on like the 200 years ago, there was a frost at that level. And then,
Chopping houses up into 3, 4, 5, 6 apartments.
oh sure, and those people should be tying in. If the city's population was greater for the sanitary sewer, by actually having these plans in place to pull stormwater and start replacing and lining sewers, that's going to take care of a lot of the I&I, which is majority of it. The rainwater eventually won't affect the sewer treatment plant. It'll take more of the storm, it'll go down the actual storm sewers, and won't need to be treated. So like a lot of those things we have in place, it's just going to take some time, but you know what I mean? Like that's where it all comes into place. It's just long-term planning. And then the only other thing on a typical day, what does the river flow an hour? Like 30,000 gallons an hour? 1 million gallons a minute, right? So 64,000, not to trivialize that either, but 64,000 gallons with the river on an average day being 1 million gallons a minute it's kind of trivial in itself. Just kind of give everybody that extra information that they might already know.
It is 1 million gallons a minute.
It's not probably average during like a rainstorm or whatever like that.
Well, I hope as we go forward, and we didn't really get into it tonight, and that's okay, but when we're talking about how it syncs back to really the master plans are, and it's probably not fair to ask Bob or Brad to give us a percentage, but I've seen some of the water lines that they pull out of the ground. I'm assuming the sewer lines are not necessarily much better, right? And how much of the I&I occurs from just having 100-year-old lines. And that's where our conversation, right, trying to get better, well, it comes at a huge cost too. Like, if we could just pass $50 million, let's do all of our, water and sewer lines today, yeah, that'd be great. But
I think that'd be a drop in the bucket too, by the way.
possibly.
Yeah. We're like 7 million or something.
Well, right. I see, but so that's exactly it. That's my point. Like, I don't know, what's the number?
When they dug up North Union Street and a couple of East State Street, we still had the terracotta lines.
Wow.
Wow.
Right, but then what we put in the ground. Right, but then what you replace it with now in 100 years is going to be the same way the iron. You know what I mean? It might last a little longer than the iron lines, but it's just a constant battle. Oh yeah.
I mean, Bob, do we know what our biggest perpetrators of that source of infiltration is, or?
Not yet. Brad and I talked about getting submarine pumps and isolating 600 pipes because they all come in through truck sewer, taking an average daily reading and then doing a rainstorm and starting there, right? Trying to pinpoint it, kind of like the water study, so that we're dealing with data.
I mean, because I know that just from living in this city for all the years that we've been trying to disconnect roof drains and sump pumps, but at the same time that water's still hitting the ground. Most of the old construction in this city, which a lot of it is old construction, isn't built to deal with it. The relief isn't there in the properties and for it to drain away somewhere.
So we have corrugated model sewer line. And from the sewer line to the 4th Street station, it's all corrugated model. It's tin that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a quarter-inch thick or less. Everyone knows it in the roads.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been our main focus. 5 years ago we started at the plan and we're heading to 4th Street and we haven't gotten there. So that's how slow the process that is for 250,000 a year.
And that's relining, right? That's not replacement.
Right.
And what are there downfalls to the relining? I mean, obviously if you're relining, you must be cutting your pipe size down. No, it's real thin.
Quarter-inch.
Okay.
It's like a foam. It's like a poly foam.
Spray foam.
It's like a bag. I remember they did it on York Street. They put this bag in there and then they played it with steam or something, right? And keeps the fly.
Hmm.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just one of many going forward. So I think what I'll ask Tiffany to do is in a month's time to put another strategic planning meeting on the agenda to take a particular, maybe more in-depth look at one of the infrastructure projects. You know, something else that we, during budget time, we've talked about, and I know it's a critical project that Bill and Bob have brought up in the past. We keep kind of kicking the stone down the road, is the city garage. So I would really like to just see the council play a greater part, at least taking the effort to keep track of the 5 and 10 year outlook, help bring projects and really try to help solve problems, make recommendations. So hopefully this is a process that we can kind of follow going forward. Okay. All right, any last questions on that? Okay, seeing nothing, we will go on to Alderman Gonzalez.
Yes. So obviously, the town halls are concluded, and one of the things that we as a council need to start talking about is the concept of I just threw it on there as a reform committee. I don't know if that's necessarily what it would be titled. I think it would be something more along the lines of a diversity and equity committee. It's also got to be kind of rolled in with the governor's appointed or mandated, I should say, committee. So I think we need to start having talks about what it's going to look like, where we're going to go. From here. Having met with a large number of people from the public who are very concerned about this and very justifiably so. So basically, I think one of the things that we really need to take a good look at, the Only on Racial Justice Coalition, they did give us this committee proposal. I think it's got a good foundation from where we could start to look at what this committee would be comprised of. We also did get, I haven't seen a copy of it though, that no. Well, yeah, so then there's the governor's component to it. That's an excellent thing, which I don't have. There's also that tab guy. He presented something that he thought we could look at. And then there's also this Mickey George guy who's emailing us repeatedly. And he's put a lot of work into his proposals. And I think, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read any of those, but I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of what he's talking about are action items that a diversity and equity could go after, pursue. But as far as the structure, what are you guys thinking? Like, have you had a chance to read through the proposal that we got at the last town hall? Is there any feedback on that? I'm not looking at you. I'm just looking in that direction. It doesn't have to be John.
Sure. All right. I don't have a problem.
You're the most prepared, John.
I've got my presentation.
Do you?
So.
Yeah, I don't have a PowerPoint.
That's all right. A question that I have, and Paul, maybe you can explain better, is what does the charter say as far as making committees go? Who can be members of committees? Because there are some points of what their proposal has members of the community. Now I know we created a subcommittee where Bill appointed for our audit and compliance committee.
Yep.
We had, I believe there were 5 members. Bill appointed a couple accountants to that committee. Does it have to be 5 members? Can it be a larger committee? I guess what is the structure under our charter that is allowed for subcommittees?
That is a good question. I don't have the answer to that. Bill, do you have any feedback on that? You set up the.
I didn't think there was a limit.
I thought we talked about we chose 5 people, like 3 council members and 2 accountants.
It's my understanding that the council can make committees of council members.
And we can set a committee.
All other committees are appointed by the mayor.
Okay.
Right. But no, we can form a committee, but if we have anybody other than a council member on it, that's where your power steps in to be able to appoint any of the committee members, whether they're council or not, if I remember correctly, but I just don't remember any limitations on it.
I believe that's correct.
I think just probably would be helpful to get that structure down so we're not just spinning in circles.
Yeah.
You know, who does what?
Yep, no, I completely agree.
Do you think it would be helpful for the council members to either email you or the mayor suggestions on people that we think in the community or people that have attended the town meetings that we feel would be helpful to have on the committee, and just kind of start forming a list before we start picking? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that's part of the process that we're going to have to do. And I don't think it needs to be, this selection committee. I think we just need to go through and email our who we think should be on it, just start a conversation.
Right. But I think the folks that definitely need to be on it, obviously are maybe 2 to 3 council members, but also police. You know,
Yep.
they have to be at least 2, maybe even more, part of the core of this committee, because they're the ones that we're going to have to ask input, and we're going to be surprised about the good information we get.
So my only thought is to get the ball rolling, like picking people that are going to ride in on the bus before you've purchased or built the bus, right? Like finding the framework for the committee would probably be more important than trying to determine who Bill should or should not appoint to the committee. Yeah, so I'm.
No, I agree.
I mean, I think today it's a necessary part of the process. It's a necessary part of our structure. I don't know any organization that doesn't pay attention to diversity and equity in their organization. So it's a way to, town halls are good to express feelings, emotion, but it doesn't necessarily pass legislation or create policy.
Yeah.
And so that's where, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on diversity. So it would be good to have people from the community or with backgrounds in organizational behavior or diversity relations, things like that.
That kind of leads me to where I wonder if it wouldn't, if the city should have some kind of equity and inclusion officer or official, like a single point of contact that would be the interface between, the chair of this committee or whatever, but they're the person that has the organizational knowledge and the background and dedication to St. Bonaventure has an equity and inclusion officer.
Bradford does.
Bradford does. Dresser Rand. I mean, any like you said, any significant organization has a person in that position, and it isn't just somebody they pull off the street, right? It's somebody who has a background in it and knows what they're talking about.
Bill, do we have an equal opportunity officer? Kind of a
Carrie?
local expert. Is Carrie?
Well, yeah, we have our Carrie's equal opportunity officer.
That's different from what we're talking
It
about.
is.
It is, but here's something to think about, okay? We don't have a per se, human resource person, okay? So, having said that, is this something where, and I don't think we can justify a full-time person, but I think we can justify a part-time person, 20, 25 hours a week. And if we could find the right person, that we can include all of that person with all of this.
Yeah.
And that person can be the person that does this. And right now, our human resources is broke up between pretty much the department heads and a few other, like we have a payroll officer and things like that. So if we can get a human resource officer in here that can take care of these and the other situation there, then I think that's a win-win.
And I think it's something like John and Paul said, us find someone that has a really strong background in behavior and equality and you know, a whole array of experience. That would be a perfect person.
I will share a resume that I just got sent to me, an individual, and I'll share the resume with it, and then we can discuss it.
So another thing to consider too is it could be one of those, a position that's like, so I don't think it should be like, or we'll have a department head that's an existing employee and just designate that as this person, right? It needs to be more than that. But,
Right, so Fred also stopped sending us all the sexual harassment emails because he kind of fills that role that an HR does.
Right.
And he's an accountant.
Right. So, but it could be like a stipend.
Kind of an accountant.
Right? Where we have a person who holds that position with the city of Olean and they're paid a flat fee every year. You know, like the historian, that kind of thing, right? Like that's a similar position to that.
I don't know if that's necessarily, I guess that.
I'm just spitballing, right?
Right, no, I know.
It's a large burden, though.
If you, we need, whatever direction we go down, right, and as we pursue modernizing our, you know, our council and our city organization, I think Bill is onto something. I think that adding a HR, human resource officer, organizational, behavioral expert to the city, you know, to a point, like you said, Paul, say to a diversity committee, you need a champion, right? You need someone, or else a committee just falls apart and it's nothing.
Yep.
Okay, so you need someone who has the skill set to lead that, and we could appoint one of us as the chairperson, but that's not our that's not my background, right? I wouldn't feel comfortable leading that charge because I don't have that experience, that background. So,
well, and the perfect example.
I think if we look for somebody, like you're saying, Bill, that has that expertise, that could be a win-win.
There's many issues that come up, you know, every day, and everything is getting more complicated.
Yeah.
So we need somebody who can be up to date. And I'll give you an example. You know, with the family medical leave, and then it became the COVID family medical leave. So I'm handling, you know, those issues, and we're having to have conversations with our labor attorneys on this because it involves employees. So if we had a person that could be up to date on just say those issues, the family medical leave, we wouldn't have to have conversations with the labor attorney, so they could handle it. So that's just one example of what goes on. We need somebody in house that can be here, so our employees can go to them if they have an issue with this or that, especially concerning human resources.
My only concern about that is, and I definitely agree. I think human resources is you know, a human resource officer is something the city of Olean needs. I would want to make sure equity and inclusion person and an HR person are not necessarily always the same thing. In fact, most of the HR people that I've ever worked with in manufacturing do not have an equity and inclusion background at all and would not be fit for, you know, not what we need, right? So if we found an equity and inclusion person who could serve as an HR officer as well, that would be great. But we want to make sure that we're going in that direction because, I mean, if you look out on Indeed and you know what I mean, and job postings, that is a very real position with a you know, a pretty substantial background that's required of it, right? And I'm not saying we're just going to be able to pull one of those out of the sky, but
I understand that. But the other thing is, Paul, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. No.
If we go to route with a part-time human resource person, then what you're saying, we get somebody else on the equity and inclusion that could be the stipend position that can help us with that.
If we could find the right person, Bill, I would, and you know I'm conservative when it comes to spending money, and I would hire a full-time person. If you could find the right person to handle, I mean, just the stuff you rattled off, that's an expertise that Fred's handling sexual harassment trainings. I mean, like, these are things that, you know, and I appreciate the fact that we've stretched our budget, right? you're given an X amount and you have your department head stepping up and taking on different roles. But in the long run, could that possibly be putting us into a risky situation? If you could find the right person, I would approve of a full-time position.
Well, and for that matter, that full-time position would be a better interface, not a better interface, that's not what I mean, but like, you know, we have three bargaining units, we have three unions that they're dealing with that we could hire, again, no offense to Bill and to Nick, we could hire an HR professional.
What about the guy that
union experience?
We hire a lawyer to interact, don't we, Bill, to negotiate for us?
Yeah.
So what do we spend on those services? If we could have someone, again,
I think that the only fear that I have is that it's just listening to you and what Bill said is, we're talking about human resources, we're talking about equality and reform. They're two different animals. And I don't want to hire someone that would dilute what we're trying to do by doing the everyday job. I think it's the clerk's office is the safety office. You know, so I just think just the things you rattled off, that could be a full-time job, and then the other position could be maybe a stipend or a part-time because we're not the same animal. It's two different mindsets, it's two different education backgrounds and qualifications. And I don't think someone that's going to be focused on the human resource aspects of the city, especially if you give them everything, like what Fred does, what Carrie does, what Len does, what Terry Delli does. Right there is a full-time position. So that other position has to be separate or it's going to get diluted.
And in which case, then maybe we need to just put a pin in the HR idea for now and focus on the.
But no, we have to do that.
Well, right. But I mean, you know, keep our eyes on you know the goal here, which is an equity and inclusion officer, liaison, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah. Bill, I think you were right. Share that resume with, because you shared the resume with me, and it was impressive.
As far as equity and inclusion or HR?
I thought everything.
I'll send it to you.
Well, and that's a great point, right? Because if we found the perfect person, my argument, Linda's argument, is all moved. Like, then that's the person, and we should.
If they can separate.
So-
It's
But I know it's
So-
also, would that be considered a civil service job too? Would that, yeah, right.
So I don't want to derail your guys' rabbit hole, and this is a great topic. But the topic at hand is the reform committee. So we've kind of got a general idea on who should chair it. Again, like through town hall meetings, through people I've spoken to outside of those meetings, these meetings here, I've heard multiple different committees. There's a reform committee for the police interaction. Other people want a community grievance board. I guess is this reform committee is referring to the governor's executive order, and we are trying to encompass other things in it, or I guess I'm trying to figure out what the plan is so that we can put the plan in place.
Plus there's a time frame. There's a deadline to.
Right, April of next year.
31st of 2021.
So before we pass the next budget. But yeah.
My understanding is what Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was what we're talking about is a council committee. Bill, are you not responsible to help us understand the committee the governor is mandating that you organize? Are these you envision these being one and the same, or?
It could be. Okay.
Does he want more than one?
The governor is mandating police reform, and there's several items in that mandate in the Executive Order 203 that and Chief Raleigh went through it the other night that a lot of we're already doing, but as part of that, the mandates that we take, we have a public input on that. There was the wording is the stakeholders have an opportunity. So
to participate, not to have input, to be a part of it. Right.
Mm-hmm. So that's what we have to are mandated to do by Executive Order 203. Now, I think from what I thought I heard back a couple of council meetings ago is that the council wanted to form a committee that would be on all issues. So now it can be one and the same. Okay, so that's what we have to decide what are we going to do here. Have one committee, or we can have a couple of committees. So,
Right. Okay. And again, it's like, are we going for the whole buffet, or are we just gonna focus on one dish? Because that's what I'm hearing is, if we make it too big and try to encompass too much, it's gonna get diluted. But if we just focus on a certain portion of what we wanna do before the deadline, I think that's a smaller committee.
Ooh.
That's a
Which is-
combination of a couple
And
council.
we really need to like get it right,
Yeah.
right? Because the public is watching. I mean, we're being filmed as we speak, right? And if we have too many committees and too many things going in multiple directions, and we're not all going in the same direction, they're not going to blame themselves. They're going to look at us and say, "You guys dropped the ball."
Right.
So,
That's kind of why I look at it as you get one committee because you're not going to try to pick out. I mean, you're trying to find a champion, right? And you got to find one champion to run 3 different charges. I think one committee would on one topic. You know what I mean? The topic isn't changing, right? It's diversity and equality, and that topic. If you're picking your all-star lineup, you don't want to have the B. You know what I mean? The bench warmers to run the other committees on something else that might be just as important to our community. So.
And you might see, once we get this started, other things might pop up that people can run with. But this is, we have to keep focused on
Sure.
one.
but that's all in the day-to-day operations of a living committee, right? Like, so you can say, okay, you go and do that or whatever, but like for
But this is what we have to work with.
yes.
So you're suggesting that we keep the 2 topics separate? Is that right, Linda? That you have the diversity, equity, and inclusion of the organization, and this police reform committee is 2.
No.
I'm
No,
sorry.
one.
They're all in one.
Yeah.
So what I was saying is, we gotta focus on the police reform and what we've
Yes.
been told we have to do.
Yes.
Instead of getting off on different, like, resources and this
Sure.
and that, we have to
Okay.
focus on what we've been tasked to do.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good listing in the one document there that of the stakeholders, but there's also other stakeholders too.
Yeah.
You have, you got industry, you got the business community. So these are stakeholders also in this community. So these are things we have to identify the stakeholders, which we have a good start on the stakeholders, and now we just refine it. And we don't want the community to be so large, like Linda says, that nothing's going to get done.
Congress is very efficient.
Well, the other people that need to be at the table is the county. We talked about that last week. They have the resources, they have the departments. They should be at the county because the county should be at the table. They're also under the state, and they have to be part of the conversation.
So they'll have to have their own.
And if they have their own, that's okay, but we have to interface at some point.
Part of work.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
This is your topic.
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
Go ahead, make a suggestion.
Yeah.
I think we need a separate work session just to discuss this.
Yeah. Not pop it on.
Oh, I had
Yeah.
no confidence that we were going to come out of this with a finished meeting, ready to roll. Like I said, I'd rather get this right than get this done quick. So I'm not saying I want to drag my feet on it at all. We're going to certainly take action, but
No, how long did it take us to get the rental inspection law? That was something we wanted to get right and make sure that it was 100%.
I'd like to have this done before the first of the year.
yeah.
Let's not wait till the deadline.
No,
Let's get it
Yeah.
going.
So we also budget season hits, and that eats up like 40 hours a week. So, not this year, but most years you're here 5 days a week, 4-hour council meetings.
Yeah, we've gotten better than that. How about if we work weeks of this Thursday, just to talk more about what the community should look like? This Thursday?
Like 2 days from now.
Yeah, well, we've been having town halls Thursday, so that's why it's just.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't do it.
I feel like we could also just so we have a regular meeting next week. There's no reason we couldn't talk about this in the whole
Right, because like most of these topics, you bring them up, everyone kind of goes home, digests, makes addition changes, maybe your constituents reach out to you, make suggestions that you hear, and then all 7 of us, or 6 for the time being, come back and say, hey, like this is what I've got, and then we kind of hash it out, and then you walk away again with this bigger storm cloud of brainstorming, and then you do it again, and you know what I mean, as it gets finally, you start refining it.
Maybe in the meantime, Bill could kind of give us a template of what he sees the committee in need of, and then Tuesday we can get their input and go from there.
Well, and I think we also need to listen to the community
Yeah.
too, right? Like I think this is a pretty good, I don't agree with every single complaint, I don't think it should be, no offense because it happens to be you, but chaired by the public safety committee leader, that's a
And I'm
position
fine
that,
with that.
yeah, like,
But
but,
we need to get moving.
yes.
Yeah, I can
So-
get copies
so
for you.
Paul, would you mind if I sent you some thoughts?
Sure.
To say,
Send it to
you don't
me.
necessarily need to start from scratch. I think, like you said, I think
Yeah.
that's a good starting point.
Agreed.
Maybe we could be tasked to send you some
Yeah.
critiques of that.
Yep.
Yeah, just our thoughts.
And use it as a starting point.
We're
Yeah.
finishing up, Major Pro is finishing up the notes from the meetings that we had, we'll send them out to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, because I like to when I'm looking at especially when I'm writing PLs for different laws and stuff, we'll take stuff from other different communities and I kind of like to just kind of print off segments that I like from stuff and then go through and hack them apart. And I'm going to make some copies of these. I have read all of these. I don't like to make notes on my original copies. I like to go through and just hack the hell out of them with red paint. So this way, I can kind of try to frame 3 or 4 of them together and see, you know what I mean? See if it's something that's, you can't frame a house if it, you know what I mean? You got to make sure the framework holds up. So.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so let's put this on for another discussion. Like I said, it doesn't have to be an hour-long discussion, but let's just touch it again in committee of the whole on Tuesday, and then we'll take it from there.
And get you some feedback before then.
Some feedback on what you think. Like take a look at the
So
some of the
Tiffany will give us a copy of this for you.
Let's,
I read both. Oh, okay.
we'll get with the resume that we were talking about. Let's get that out to the council.
I'll get that out tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
Also, do we want to talk about the vacancy on the council now? So just think about if you know someone on Board 6 that you can consider for that position, reach out to the mayor.
I got one that comes to mind, but I think he's being watched by the FBI right now for his Facebook page.
So what we don't typically do in committee is, but being the topic at hand, and we do have people here tonight, I would like to, if you're here just to watch, but if you're here to offer a comment, I will accept a comment from the public if anyone has something they would like to say at this time.
You know me. I'll be short tonight, though. I appreciate you guys putting it on the agenda. We're gonna open it up Tuesday night, but I would encourage you guys to do something sooner rather than later. I know everybody wants to take bits and pieces of different legislation or different programs and try to get one that fits only in. But you can do that forever, or you can just put a committee together with some good bones, good foundation, let it build off of itself, and see where it takes her. I know you have to come up with a committee here pretty soon, Mayor, to fit both roles. Makes perfectly good sense. Every corporation has a diversity committee. A lot of cities have them. It's not rocket science. We're not recreating the wheel. It's already being done all over the place. So we're just kind of bringing the city old and up to modern times. Some people will laugh. Some people will think it's funny. That's okay. Just push Olean in the right direction for the kids, for the younger kids that are coming up. They're the ones that are going to benefit off of the decisions you make right now. So it doesn't have to take a long time. You know, we shouldn't be talking about this in a week and a half from now, or 2 weeks from now. I mean, we should have a plan by then. I mean, I know government moves slow, but we don't have to move that slow.
Thank you.
I would just hope that, you guys don't keep pushing the issues down, like, all these, you guys gotta keep making discussions about, like, how to put it together and stuff. I hope that you guys do your homework, and Tuesday, we can really come to something. Second, it don't have nothing to do with that, but it does have something to do with the streaming that you guys were talking about earlier. And you guys was talking about the deaf people and stuff. There is, software out there that you guys can have that will do everything that you're talking about. One software that will, you can stream it with TV, sound, captions. You can even put another camera up there if you needed to have the person doing the sign language. They could stand right there. You have 2 camera feeds right on your own screen, and it would all come up. The lady from, what's her name? From the
Boundless Connection?
Christina, she probably could help you with that. And it's not expensive.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay. So I will make a motion to approve committee reports, which we have none. Is that right, Tiffany? Okay. So then there's no motion needed. So there is one thing not on the agenda that I need to make a motion to go into executive session. Could I have a second,
I
please?
will second that.
Seconded by Alderman Gonzalez. All in favor? Aye. Make a motion to adjourn.
Were you recording?
No, I just turned it on so I could get the second.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm not-
Seconded by Alderman Gonzalez. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.